Welcome to History Twists. Today, we're taking on a war that most Americans barely remember and twisting it into something they'd never forget.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the War of 1812, a scrappy, confused conflict between the US and Britain. There were no clear winners, just a lot of smoke, fire, burnt legislatures, and Andrew Jackson's ego. But what if America lost?
Oh no, not just a few battles. We're talking full collapse. The British take Washington and keep going. Madison is captured. New England secedes. The American experiment over before it really began.
Let's rewind. It's 1814. The British, fresh off defeating Napoleon, finally shift their focus onto the previously ignored American front. In our timeline, they burned DC, but then backed off. In this one, they doubled down.
They hold D.C., they push into Pennsylvania, Baltimore falls, the Chesapeake becomes a British stronghold, and here's the kicker. They support a Federalist-led rebellion in New England. Meanwhile, the South, furious and leaderless, fractures. Jackson is stuck in the bayous of Louisiana, fighting a battle that doesn't matter. The U.S. government is exiled to the frontier. It's chaos.
By 1815, a treaty is signed, not in Ghent, but in London. Britain regains control of the eastern seaboard from Maine to Maryland. The Midwest becomes a British buffer zone. The South, a rogue republic.
And the American dream, DOA, dead on arrival. No manifest destiny, no civil war, no superpower. Instead, a fractured continent, British colonies to the north and east, Spanish territories to the south and west, and a patchwork of failed states in between.
Canada thrives. Britain cements its global dominance even more, and the world map looks very, very different.
No Lincoln, no Roosevelt, no Hollywood, no Silicon Valley, just a long footnote in a dusty British ledger. The failed rebellion 1776 1815.
And that, folks, is what happens when the British don't pack up after burning the White House. Getting back to our history twist, the British Navy blockades the East Coast, cutting off supplies and reinforcements. As we said, Baltimore and Philadelphia fall, British troops push inland.
And then comes the domino effect. The Federalists in New England, already anti-war, already angry, meet at the Hartford Convention. But this time, they don't just complain.
Check out our pre-Civil War secession podcast for what happens in the real world. But in this timeline, they secede. With full British backing, a New England Confederacy is declared. Boston becomes its capital. Royal ships fill the harbor. But they're not the only ones breaking away. In the Midwest, Native American leaders, finally unified, Tecumseh's vision lives on, form the unified Native American Republic stretching from the Great Lakes to the Mississippi. The British recognized the Republic as a sovereign ally. In return, Native forces helped push U.S. militias out of the Ohio and Indiana territories.
This is huge. In our current timeline, Native resistance, this is in real history, Native resistance was crushed. Here, it thrives. A major continental power that keeps expansionist settlers at bay for generations.
Meanwhile, in the South, the states splinter. Andrew Jackson is holed up in New Orleans, never able to make his historic victory, preparing for a final stand, a battle that in this reality never makes the history books or the songbooks.
And here's where it gets weird. No manifest destiny, no Oregon Trail, no gold rush. The Pacific remains untouched by the stars and stripes.
Instead, the British hold Canada forever and the eastern seaboard. Spain grips the west. The U.S. never rises beyond a regional power.
No Civil War, no Lincoln, as we said, no Roosevelt, as we said, no Cold War, just a fractured continent where the American experiment collapses before it found its feet.
And maybe, just maybe, one positive outcome: a stronger native Confederacy that holds its ground, a nation that wasn't erased from history. But there's another front we haven't really talked about yet: the rest of the South. And this one, it burns harder than the rest.
The British, smarting from years of American rebellion, decide to hit where it hurts, the Southern economy. And they do it with a weapon the U.S. never saw coming: freedom.
Enter the British Colonial Marines, a regiment of formerly enslaved black men who escaped from the plantations and, just like during the Revolution, see our Harry Washington podcast for that, joined the British in exchange for arms, training, and liberty.
In this alternate timeline, they don't just fight, they liberate. South Carolina and Georgia become open battlegrounds, not just of armies, but of ideologies. By the end of 1815, the British control the Carolina coast. Slavery collapses there permanently. Freed black communities establish fortified towns under British protection. They call it the Free Coast.
It becomes a sanctuary. Thousands flee south, not north. History turns upside down.
And just like that, another thread unravels. Without the same economic engine, the South weakens. No Confederacy is waiting in the wings. No cottage kingdom, no civil war.
In this world, the United States doesn't abolish slavery, it loses it violently, piece by piece. By late 1815, Maryland and Virginia are on the edge of collapse. British ships control the Chesapeake. Freemen under the Union Jack are burning plantations. Militia ranks are thinning or deserting altogether.
So the planters turn to a radical idea, one they would have hanged a man for suggesting just months earlier.
It's the desperate echo of an impossible proposal that wouldn't be uttered for another 50 years in our timeline. But here, they're out of options and they know it.
Southern leaders issue a declaration: freedom for any slave who serves the Republic for 1 year. Now, in our timeline, this idea was put forth by Patrick Claiborne in 1863 in an attempt to save the Confederacy.
It's total chaos. Half the elite calls it madness, the other half calls it salvation. Across the countryside, enslaved men are dragged into drilling camps, offered uniforms and an uncertain freedom.
Some accept, seeing it as the only chance they'll ever get. Others flee to the British, who offer full freedom without the bayonet clause.
This is a moral gray zone here, friends. It's not justice, it's not equality, it's a certain amount of leverage. For thousands of Black Americans, it's a crack in slavery's brutal wall.
The irony is brutal. Virginia, the cradle of American liberty, is now promising freedom in exchange for war, the exact model the Confederacy would almost adopt during its death spiral. But it's too late. Maryland falls. Richmond burns. The slave soldier program fizzles in the face of British firepower and mass desertion. Still, the memory lingers. A Southern policy born of desperation, planting the seeds of complicated truth and even more complicated legacies.
By 1816, The American Republic isn't entirely dead, but it's certainly emasculating. The Union as we know it, torn apart, the coast lost, the South fractured, the frontier was carved into pieces.
What's left is a withered shell, clinging to dignity in the mid-Atlantic states, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and a fractured Virginia. The capital, once Washington, is moved inland, Harrisburg, maybe, or York.
They call the new nation the Provisional Republic, but no one buys it. It has no navy, no allies, no leverage, no money, just endless committees and a flag that fewer and fewer citizens salute.
It governs what it can, mostly out of habit. It still holds elections, it still issues currency, but the world has moved on.
To the north, British banners fly over Boston and New York. To the south, freemen govern the Carolina coast. To the west, the United Native American Republic guards its borders with muskets, tradition, and memory. And in between, this shriveled remnant of a mighty revolution that had once promised the world a vision of freedom stumbles along.
And the American dream, still alive maybe, but on life support, whispering through the halls of a broken capital, surrounded by enemies and haunted by missed chances.
Now, it would be entirely unfair to say everything was negative. While the Provisional Republic flails in the Mid Atlantic, one state, my home state, doesn't just survive, it mutates into something entirely new.
Yeah, that would be New Jersey, right, Dr. Deneen?
Indeed,
Sandwiched between occupied New York and shattered Pennsylvania, declares itself neutral, not British, not Federalist, not Southern, just Jersey.
I like to think we would have done that in such a crisis. They style themselves the Switzerland of North America, fiercely independent, armed to the teeth, and ready to sell anything to anyone for a price.
First move, they start digging, not trenches, canals. The Delaware Raritan system becomes the economic artery that the Erie Canal would have been. Goods flow from the interior straight to the Atlantic.
Then they build massive public workshops, state run, pumping out tools, weapons, and machinery 24 hours a day. No one goes hungry. If you can hold a hammer or write a form, you've got a job.
And don't mistake neutrality for weakness. New Jersey mandates universal militia service. Every town trains with muskets. Every church has a powder store. Interesting sort of combination there, isn't it? Every canal barge can be converted into a gunboat by sundown.
The rest of the continent doesn't quite know what to make of them. They're not a fully independent republic. They're not a monarchy. They're not a military junta. They're a factory and a fortress. Corporatism a century earlier. See our corporatist podcast to learn about that. Flying a homemade flag and daring anyone to cross the river.
And while armies fight and empires expand, Jersey just builds, trades, and watches, waiting for the rest of the world to exhaust itself.
In this alternate 1816, New Jersey becomes not a punchline but a paradox. Isolated but connected, modest in size but massive in ambition, sort of a mix between Switzerland and Israel.
And the quiet giant of the Northeast, neutral, profitable, dangerous. And just when you think Jersey can't get weirder, it does.
Hang on to your hats, folks. This part, historians still argue over it. In our world, they would have seen it as impossible. But in 1822, 26 years before the Seneca Falls Convention and 48 years before the 15th Amendment to the Constitution in our reality, widows in New Jersey start voting.
Not all women, not yet, just widows. war widows, tradesmen's widows, canal workers' widows, women who had no husband left to vote and yet owned property, ran businesses, and paid taxes.
You know what this reminds me of, Dr. Weaver? One of our very first podcasts about Sparta, showing how many rights women had in that Greek city-state because the men were all fighting all the time. And here's the twist, ladies and gentlemen. This wasn't a suffragist idea. They weren't voting as women. They were legally understood to be voting in the name of their dead husbands.
It sounds absurd now, but in Jersey, where every citizen was expected to defend the state and contribute to industry, they figured if a woman could run the forge, she could cast the ballot.
It makes sense. It wasn't feminism, it wasn't progressivism, it was the pragmatism of a society that didn't know anything else, that would try anything once, and it sure stuck.
By the 1850s, in this timeline, widow voting rights were encoded into Jersey state law, a loophole turned into a norm, and it sets the stage for full women's suffrage decades earlier than in our time.
New Zealand does the same thing in our world in the 1870s. The rest of the North American continent didn't know what to make of this idea. New York dismisses it, the South is horrified, but in the Free Coast and the Native American Republic, it sparks questions. Those women want those rights too and deserve them.
In this fractured America, New Jersey becomes more than just a fortress and factory. It's a test lab for political reinvention.
So, what becomes of this shattered America as a whole? It's a land cut into fragments, each carrying pieces of the original revolution, but none with the full picture or the full economic development.
The 19th century doesn't bring unity, it brings competition and cold calculation.
The provisional republic, clinging to the mid Atlantic, becomes a bureaucratic relic living in the past, safe but stagnant, with less change than the Amish, forever debating its past, never quite charting a future.
New Jersey, now industrialized and fortified, becomes a weird mix of Detroit, Zurich, and Sparta. Neutral, but not naive, armed, rich, and distrustful of outsiders.
The New England Confederacy thrives under British patronage, a constitutional monarchy in all but name. It becomes a cultural satellite of London, lace collars, clipper ships, and heavy taxes.
To the south, the free coast of the Carolinas is a haven for freedmen and refugees. It aligns loosely with British abolitionists, but grows increasingly independent, a melting pot built on survival, farming, and black self governance.
If you want a real analysis of this, read Eric Flynn's 1824 The Frontier Wars. But the beating heart of the continent, the United Native American Republic, a federation of nations that holds the entire Mississippi Valley, what does it do? It traded with Jersey, fought off incursions, and taught the world that indigenous power didn't have to mean assimilation on reservations or extinction. There's no transcontinental railroad, not yet, but there are canal empires, state rail networks, and merchant alliances, sort of like the European Union. Technology advances unevenly. There are telegraphs here and stagecoaches over there.
Wars break out, dozens of them, not world wars, regional conflicts, turf wars, trade disputes, skirmishes between the Free Coast and Georgia holdovers, tense standoffs along the Ohio River, but no full-scale civil war, no Appomattox. By the turn of the century, North America looks like Europe, not the United States. 8 or 9 fully sovereign states, shifting borders, constant diplomacy.
Slavery ends, but at different times in different places. Voting rights, segregation, and so on go back and forth depending on where you are. Women vote, but in patches, beginning with Jersey's widows and spreading through necessity more than ideology.
There's no Monroe Doctrine, No manifest destiny, no Panama Canal, but there are dozens of flags flying across what we call America.
In the world that we know, America became an empire, for better or worse. In this one, it became a continent full of experiments. Messy, divided, sometimes horrible, sometimes beautiful, always unstable.
And maybe in a strange way, more honest. A place that never pretended to be one thing because it never could be.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on History Twist. Please leave a like and a comment. We really have enjoyed this and our sister podcast, Things You Don't Know. We have a lot of wonderful things coming up for both. And I'm going to go in the next few months and try to do some things of my own on another podcast. So opportunity flourishes, and we love hearing your opinions and your comments. So please keep in touch and come back real soon.
Indeed. Bye for now.
So long.